Thank you for coming along. I wanted to talk you through how Picturepath would work for schools and how you can actually use this to replace the physical laminated timelines which you use at the moment in the school, which are great for reducing anxiety, but they cause all sorts of problems around the fact that they take an age to print and laminate, and then you lose the one that you want and you're wasting all that plastic, and it's not a very efficient solution. So to save you the time and also to produce something which will work for the children that are going to be using it, we've developed Picturepath. And this is what you would see as a teacher when you first log on to Picturepath. So you've got your classes that you've been assigned here, and you can then add another class. So if you want to add a class, you just click the button and then you can select an image. So let's choose an image to go with that. So here's our classroom image. So let's choose that one, and you can make it, you can zoom it out, zoom it in, however you'd like it, rotate it around, whatever. So let's just add a name. So we'll call it Demo Class, and we'll add a teacher. There we go, like that. Miss Mortimer's going to be in charge of that. So now we can see the class timeline. We can edit it if we want to change anything. So if we change the teacher, Mr. Taylor's in charge, we can actually change that. Or we want to change the picture if they've moved to a new class. Or you want to just change the name. It might be Year 1 class now, it might be Year 2 class. So when you go into the class timeline, you've not got anything on the timeline at the moment. So that is your events for the day, and there's nothing on there, and there's no pupils that you can select at the moment. So what we'll do is we'll add some pupils to the class. So we'll add Jane and we'll add Sally as well. So they're now in this demo class. So now what we're going to do is we're going to actually go in and add some lessons to that particular class. So here's our class timeline, and we've got some lessons that are loaded on for today. So let's go to the next, let's go for the next day, and let's build ourselves a routine to actually add to that day. So you can actually add a routine, which is several lessons or several activities all added together, or just add a single activity. And we'll look at each of those in turn. So first off, adding a routine. So let's say this is going to be your lessons that we've created this routine previously. And these are all the lessons for Monday. So let's say it's assembly, maths, English, science, break time, history, books, lunch, computer, cross country, and then home. And what you can do is you can make that repeat not at all. So it's just a one-off event every day. So it might be something that might be happening for 5 days. So it might be, you might be practicing a school play or a concert. And so you might want to make that repeat every day for 5 days for the week, or you can make it repeat weekly. So let's say this is going to be our lessons for the next 6 weeks. And then you put the number in and then add it to the timeline. So there we go. We've got all of our lessons added in, and they're now being scheduled and available for the next few days. And if you need to change something, say English is happening before maths, you can just drag it to wherever you need to put it and move it there. Talked about adding individual activities. So you can either use something which is here already. So here's ones we've used previously. So we use maths or English. Or you can create a new one, or you can choose one from the library here. You either search, or you can just scroll through and look for something. So let's say we're going to create a new activity. So let's add an activity, and you can either use the images we've got here. You can continue without an image, because the idea being we want to make this very personable, so that whatever works for each individual pupil, you can build it the way they like it. So some people won't want an image. Some people will want just a very basic image. Others might want a picture. So it's whatever works for you. So let's say you're going to upload a picture, and here we go. Let's say, there we go. We've got a COVID test for sake of argument. Right. So let's call this COVID test. There we go. Let's say you're going to do a COVID test. So let's add that to the timeline. So we've now created that, and let's add it to the timeline. So now when you add something to the timeline, it automatically goes to the end of the day. And then you can decide where in the day it's going to go. So let's say it's going to go there before the computer lesson. You just move it to wherever you need it to be. Then when you go to the individual pupils, they all have that timeline loaded to them. So if you go to Jane, there you go, you can see she has the timeline for all of that day already loaded. And there are a few other buttons that appear when you go into the individual child mode, and we'll talk through what the school and home sharing, and this little button here, which allows you to give some feedback. So let's say Jane, though, is doing something slightly different to the rest of the class. We want this to be a tool where you don't have to build everything individually. You can build it for the whole class and then manage by exceptions. So let's say Jane isn't having a COVID test. The rest of the class might be she isn't. So let's just delete that out from her timeline. Now, when you come back here to select the pupil, you can see here Jane has got a black dot, which tells you that Jane has something different to the rest of the class. So we know that as teachers and Senkos, you sometimes have pupils who have different timelines, and you don't want to then have to find that out at the very moment. You want to actually give them some warning. So you know that Jane's not going to be doing the rest of the things of the class. So you can actually say to Jane, look, this is what's coming up. So the display view button here is what the pupil would actually see. So you can see it, we've got it in a now and next mode, in horizontal or vertical, whichever way works best for the child. So you can choose whatever way, and it can be different for each individual child. This button gives you, instead of just a now and next, this gives you a full day view. And again, it can be horizontal or it can be vertical, whatever works best for them. And then this is the view that the user would actually see. So let's say Jane's going in, assembly's finished, and when you tick it off, it gives you the option to give you some feedback. So yes, enjoyed assembly. Maths is finished. No, didn't enjoy maths. And the same works again in the now and next format. English is finished. Did you enjoy it? Yes. And there we go. Science is now up, and then it'll be break time. Now, we had a lovely lad who was absolutely fantastic and brilliant, and he was non-verbal, and he ticked everything off on his timeline and proudly showed his TA the iPad where it said break time. The TA rang me up and said, listen, please, can we actually get an undo button in this, because he's working through this and he knows what he's doing and he's ticking it and he's showing me it's break time. So what you can do now in the completed activities thing, you can actually go in there and you can untick it to say, no, that's not completed. So if you tick something off by mistake, or you've got a child who's as cheeky as this one we're talking about, then you can actually just undo things like that. And so you just undo everything. And then when you come back to view the timeline, so now you can actually see, if you remove the completed activities, it's now down as maths, English, science. And also some people will just want to see what their completed activities are. So you can see here, assembly is completed and it's ticked off. Maths is not completed, it's not ticked off. And as soon as it is ticked off, there you go. It will then go to be grayed out when you change the view on that. So come back, there we go, it's grayed out there. This button here allows you to share between school and home. Now, Jane's not a real pupil, but if she were and she had some home time on the table, you could see here by clicking this button. The reason we put this on is transitions from home to school and school to home are always key flashpoints and key times of stress for pupils. And we want to remove that and just make them calm about what's coming. So my son would go into school with his football bag and his football boots and his skins and his football top and everything else, and you'd think he might realize it's football after school, but no, he's put his bag on his peg, he's forgotten. So he's been saying to his TA all day long, what am I doing after school? 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 So she's got to go check a homeschool diary or go check the teachers and see what's happening. Whereas now he can just click this button and see that here it would actually show his home activities. So it would actually then say, okay, you've got football, and then you're getting picked up by the grandparents. So he would actually see it would all be calmer. We've had pupils as well who've had a lot of issues around if you've got a different activity happening after school, say if you've got a different taxi driver taking you home, and then you find that the pupils then get very upset about the fact that rather than it being Bob, it's Nigel that's picking them up. So what they need to do is they need to know who's coming. So what you can actually do is, as a parent, I can change things remotely on my son's iPad at school. So if I put down that we're going shopping after school, that will appear on his timeline. So he will actually see that when he flicks the school home button, he'll see that what's happening after school is not we're going straight home, we're going shopping, then we're going home. So then again, it helps to reduce that stress when you pick them up from school. And equally, it works well for teachers, because if you get a child who comes in and they're really distressed and you don't know what's been going on, you look at the timeline, they might have been to the doctors that morning, and you think, okay, right, well, that might explain why they're a bit out of sorts. So it gives you a bit of a clue and a way that you can actually ask questions, because also it means for me as a parent, using my iPad or using my phone, I can actually see what's going on with Freddie at school. So I can speak to him and say, what have you done at school today? Now, normally, if I say that question, he'll say, oh, nothing, or oh, I had lunch, which is great. I'm glad he's eaten lunch, but I'd like to get a bit more of a conversation. So when I was actually at the autism show demonstrating Picturepath to someone, I flicked the button on my phone to say, look, this is the school timeline that Freddie's got at the moment. And it said lockdown drill, which I was like, wow, okay. So we've got a lockdown drill happening. So I picked him up from school, and the first question I asked him was, I hear you had a lockdown drill. How did it go? And he loved it. He thought it was brilliant. And he told me, talk non-stop for 20 minutes. And eventually we got the story correct. And the reason why he loved it was all the children were safe. They hid under their desk. The teacher was dead because he was too big to get under his desk. And they thought that was hilarious. So I wouldn't have had that conversation with him had I not seen it on Picturepath. And this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to improve communication between school and home so that you can have that conversation with the children, whether it is a child that you're working with or whether you as a parent can then see what's been going on at school and you can have those conversations. You can also send information and notes down here. So let's say that you've got something which you might say, there's a letter in the school bag. You can actually put, there's a letter in the school bag, if I can spell it, and you can say, today went really well, and there's a letter in the school bag. You can send it via email if you want. So you could send that to, joe.smith at blah, blah, blah. And so then Jane's mum will then get a note to say there's a letter in the school bag, and also that she's had a really good day today. So this is, again, what we're trying to do is we're just trying to build up things which can actually help to reduce the workload. Because I was speaking to someone the other day and they were talking about the fact that it might only take 5-10 minutes to do a homeschool diary, but if you've got to do 10 of them, then it gets really tedious. Whereas if we can just write little notes and then send it with the Picturepath app, then that's perfect. That saves them so much time, and you don't lose the books don't get tatty, you don't have all of that feedback which people have struggled with. Now, another thing we can actually do with these timelines is the ability to print them off. So if you're going to be going somewhere, we had a class that was going down to Derbyshire to Blue John Mines, and they obviously couldn't take down iPads and everything else down there. So what they did was they printed off the day like this and then gave a copy, one sheet to each one of the SEN children, so they could then tick things off as they were in the mine, and it was just on a sheet of paper for them. So if you need to print it off, or if you've got a child that perhaps doesn't respond very well to a device, you can create it and then just print it off for them on there. Now, this works on, as I say, tablets, on mobile phones, and with the web app version, which I'm showing you here for teachers, this also works on a laptop. It will work on a computer or a whiteboard. So you've got the flexibility to use it however you'd like. And if you update something, say, on the teacher's laptop, this will then update on all the individual devices. So if the children are working on Chromebooks and you need to change what their timetable is going to be, you can actually just do that as and when you need to actually do that. So what we've done here is say, we've just run through sort of how you create the classes, if you wanted to add pupils, you just use this menu on the side here and you can add a pupil. And again, it's exactly the same thing as adding the class. You just search for the image of the pupil that you're going to add, and then you just add a name, a username, and a password, and assign them a class. The username and password means that if you've got a child that's working using a tablet or using a Google Chromebook or something like that, then what you can actually do is they can log on using their username. So let's say we took Jane Smith earlier. If we used the username of we just called her Jane Smith, and then we gave them a password, and she could log on via the web address of app.mypicturepath.com. She'll be able to log on there, add herself a password, and then add the password, and then all she would see would be the child view, and she wouldn't have the ability to edit the timeline, but she would be able to see her own timeline. She wouldn't see any of the other children in the class, because obviously data security is really important, and we want to make sure that nobody gets to see any information that doesn't relate to them. The other thing to say as well, when you do see a pupil's timeline, so let's say Jane's timeline that we're talking about here, what you can also do as well is, instead of just going to see that, there's this edit button here, and if you needed to change her name or add the username or password at a later date, you can do that. And you can also invite a parent to share. And this is how you control the information flow. So without clicking this link, the school and home won't be linked up together. So the school would send an invitation to the parent, so they would just put their email address here and then send that through to them. The parent then who's downloaded the app will then get notification on their app, which is linked to that email address, and they would then have the option to accept or reject the link with the school. Other things to say as well, obviously we mentioned activities, and you can add a single activity, so you can create a new activity that's just a single activity, or you can add a grouped activity. So if you wanted to add an activity group, this is where you create a lesson or an activity and you break it down into its individual parts. So let's say we're going to create an activity group, and let's say we're going to create something called maths. Now within the maths lesson, we might have several different parts within the lesson. So let's say this is the maths lesson. So the primary activity is it's going to be maths. But let's say the first thing you're going to do is minute maths. And let's say there's then going to be a 5-minute break. And then we might have a discussion. And then we might be doing some more maths. So that's the individual parts within the activity. So we've broken maths down into the minute maths, a 5-minute break, discussions, and then the actual maths itself. So if we save that, it's now been created. So what we can actually do now is we can go to our classes and we can add the activity. And so let's have a look here. Maths. And I've built a few of these before, so people have built them with different activities within them. So let's say that's the one we want. Let's add that to our timeline. Now, when you add it to the timeline, it goes at the end of the day, as we mentioned previously, and you can move that to wherever it needs to be in the day. So let's say it's there, and you can see here it's got this yellow edge, this yellow border around it. So if you actually click on the activity now to tick it off, what it does is it brings up the maths with the individual parts of it. So you've got your minute maths, you've got your break, and then you've got the maths. As you tick each part of it, so you tick the minute maths, it's marked as done, but the overall lesson is not complete. So they're not going to see everything done. Then we have a 5-minute break. Again, that's marked as done, but the whole activity is not finished yet. And last of all, when you tick maths, the last part of the lesson, or if you just ticked the top part of the lesson, the whole lesson then is now done. And there it goes, it clears off the timeline. So that way then you can actually then see all the individual parts within a lesson, because we had a school that were using it and we had an issue around PE. They would mark PE, they would then tick off PE because the next activity was get undressed, and the children were confused because they thought PE was finished because it had been ticked off. So what they asked for us to do is to create the ability to create subparts within an activity. So that's why we've created those activity groups. So you can actually then go in and build something which has got different parts to it, because it's all part of the whole lesson or the whole activity, but you've got the individual parts within there. So it might be a science lesson. So you've got a demonstration, then you're going to have a discussion, and then you might be going to go and collect all your equipment, and then you might be trying to replicate the experiment. So whatever it would be, you can break it down into the individual parts within that lesson. So overall, we've run through everything we've covered on Picturepath there. We've tried to keep everything as simple and intuitive as possible. A key thing for Picturepath is the fact that we want this to be something which is really straightforward to use. It's not going to have a real difficulty in picking it up, because I know there's a lot of technology out there that looks really great, but then you have so many parts to it that you just don't start to use it and get things to work properly. But equally, if there's things in there which you'd benefit from seeing, or if there are things that don't make sense to you, or you think could be done a bit better, or would benefit your pupils, please contact us, because all of our feedback drives all of our development. So we build everything based on what our users need. So if enough people say they need something, so the homeschool sharing was a prime example, If people say they need it, we'll build it. That's what we're all about. We want this to help as many people as possible, to just reduce the stress in the classrooms, to save a load of time from creating and printing and laminating and sticking, reduce all the costs associated with that, all the plastic waste, and then just give people something which is in a format which they can use, they can continue to use through their school life. They can use it. We've got people who are using it as adults and transitioning from school into employment. So, for instance, if people are going on to work experience, they don't want to carry a big bulky PEC satchel that marks them out as different. They often want something which is going to be on their phone or their tablet, because it's okay to be out in the public and looking at your phone. And this is what we want to do. Build something which is going to work for as many people as possible and just make lives better for both the pupils, the parents, and the teachers. And if there's any questions, please just get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.